So we're going to be working on the speaking section today. Does anyone remember how many questions we had in the speaking section? Does anyone remember?
You were asking us some questions and you needed to respond some phrases specifically like, I would definitely agree, like that.
Okay, yeah, that's question number one. But I was asking right now, does anyone remember how many questions or how many tasks or types of questions we had in the speaking section?
Four.
Four, exactly. So in the speaking section, we have four different types of questions, four different questions. We have question number one, which is the independent question. Then question 2, 3, and 4, which are the integrated questions. Now, today we're going to start with the integrated questions. So these are the ones that depend upon something else, the ones where you have to summarize something that they ask you to summarize. So a specific content, it could be something you read, something that you hear, but you need to summarize something for the integrated questions, right? And today specifically, we're going to be working on question number 2 of the speaking section. Okay, so that you will know where we are. We're working on question number 2. Do you guys have any questions before we get started with today's class? No questions? Okay. So first thing, we are going to remember this question because I know it's sometimes hard to remember which one is question 2 and 3 and 4 because numbers are not something that we remember that well. But what we're going to do is we're going to call this the university question. Okay, we're going to call it like that because it is about university. Okay, so okay, the first thing that I want to say, this question specifically, every question requires a certain type of vocabulary in the speaking section. Now, this question specifically requires for you guys to first thing have vocabulary related to university life and also to have an understanding of how university life works in the United States, okay, in America, because this question is going to be about that. Okay, so in order for you not to get lost, in order for you to improve your comprehension of the content they give, in order for you to improve your vocabulary, then you have to have an understanding of, you know, it's not that complicated, but just it's different, you know, the way that the academic world in the US is completely different than the one we have around this region. So it's important to be familiarized with that. Like, for example, we have a few things here. One, can you think of any differences between college life here in South America versus college life in the US? Can you guys think of any difference?
Scholarships.
Scholarships, okay. So what would the difference be?
Sorry, I've got a question. When you said what is the difference between Americans and South American colleges, you are talking about not school, right? You're talking about after you finishing school, you have to make 2 years, I think, of college, and then you are going to the university, I think. I'm wrong.
Well, not necessarily. No, not really. So yeah, it depends. You know, there are some these colleges just that work for liberal arts, and those are the ones for years where you do something that's basically similar to school. But in general, you have the same system, we could say, usually a 4 or 5 years degree. That is what we call university here, and it's also university in the US, but you know, college is like a synonym. So basically, it works in the same way in terms of time. So you graduate from high school and then you can do it's called a bachelor's degree, and it's usually 4 or 5 years degree. Okay, but I'm asking about the life of a student. You know, think about the life of a student, a university student here in our region versus in the US. So can you think of any differences there? So Wilder was saying scholarships. So what do you mean exactly?
I think American universities, they give you different kind of scholarships. for example, to people that do a lot of sport, they win a scholarship just for doing that.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Yeah, that's
don't know any university here that you win a scholarship for sports, to be honest.
okay. So yeah, I think so. I'm not sure about. I think that scholarships are a thing here too. You know, universities give scholarships as well to some students. About sports scholarships, I think that yeah, I've heard like for example, um, the thing is here, at least in Bolivia, like most universities don't focus too much on the sports life, right? They don't have such an established team of different sports. They don't compete too much. It's not such a competitive thing. But in the US, yeah, sports tends to be a highly competitive area, especially speaking of university students, and they have really well-established teams. So yeah, they do give a lot of scholarships, even to international students who practice sports and are know who are going to be participating in the university team. Okay, so yeah, that would be one difference. Can you think of another difference?
The price also, because in the USA, every universities or college are extremely expensive, and South America is less. And there's even a difference because in South America, the majority of people who study there is only local people. In the USA, the majority of people are foreigners, not all Americans.
Okay. So yeah, actually that's a really good one. So yeah, the prices are higher than here definitely, and that's why many students have to have loans, right, in order to go to college, and they end up with these huge loans when they graduate. So yeah, tuition prices are definitely different and they are a lot more expensive. Now, one difference that I'm thinking of, and I would say that is the main thing for this question specifically, is the fact that students, not all of them, but many students tend to live in the university, right? So they live on campus. I would say that that would be the main difference, thinking about the life of the life as a student, right? So usually here in South America, it isn't that common, at least in Bolivia. I don't think there's a university that allows on-campus living or housing, but in the US, it's such a common thing, right? So maybe the majority of students live within campus. So I would say that's the main difference. They sometimes, or they are allowed to live, they have these commodities that are called dorms or dormitories or residences within the university where students can actually live, right? And as they're going to live there, then they need to use many facilities that we don't really have in universities here, right? Like for example, they have very organized, huge cafeterias, as you can see here. So they have activities for recreation. They have gyms. They have, well, we have libraries too, you know, but they have, maybe it's in a different level. They have medical services there, transport services available for students who live on and off campus. And I cannot see the other, and security, of course. Okay, so maybe that's one of the differences. And I think that understanding that, how that works, the options that as a student one could have when studying in the US is going to help you acquire and expand your vocabulary for this task, and also understand better what's going on when you have to read or listen to something later in the task. Okay. So let's keep this part. Okay, guys. So what is it exactly that you have to do here for this task? Pay attention to this. Basically, for this question, you will first have to read something. So the first step is going to be reading. You will be given a short text that you have to read. This text is usually a letter from the university or one letter from a student. Okay, so it's a letter or it's an article, maybe It's something that you would read probably in the newspaper, because another thing that some universities have is like a newspaper. So it's something that you would read in the university newspaper, okay? So first thing, you're gonna read this letter, read this text, and you will have exactly 45 seconds to do so. So only 45 seconds to read that letter. After you read, you will have to listen to a conversation. So they will play an audio where you're gonna listen to two students who are gonna be discussing that letter. They're gonna be talking about that letter or that text that you just read. Okay, so you have to listen to this conversation, you need to take notes, and this usually lasts like 1 minute approximately. Okay, it could be more, it could be less. Now, after all of that is done, after you've read and after you've heard the conversation, you will get 30 seconds to prepare your response. So the clock starts counting down, you get 30 seconds exactly to prepare. Once the 30 seconds are over, you will get 1 minute to speak. And during this 1 minute, you need to answer the question they ask. Okay? So to summarize, first you read for 45 seconds this short text, then you listen to a conversation for about 1 minute, then you get 30 seconds to prepare and 1 minute to speak. This is the structure, that is the format of this question. Do you guys have any questions about that?
I have a question. Is it necessary to write it down in a piece of paper, or we can do it by our laptops?
Great question, Jasper. That's actually a great question. When you're taking the test, you will only be able to take notes on a piece of paper. So you need to practice like that as well. You're gonna take notes on a piece of paper. If you guys are gonna take the home edition test, then you will have to take notes in a different way. You need to have a whiteboard or a transparent sheet where you're gonna take notes with a marker. So it depends. If you guys are planning on taking the home edition test, then practice by taking notes the way that you do it there with the whiteboard or the transparent sheet. And if you guys are gonna take the test in a test center, then make sure that you have a piece of paper always to take notes. Yes, Caroline?
Do you think we need templates for this task?
Okay, good question as well. I'm gonna give you guys a template. I would say that you need a template at least in the beginning, when you're starting to practice, when you're getting used to the structure. In order to memorize the structure and the body of your response, you do need a template. But later you're gonna realize that once you have that memorized, it's gonna come naturally. You won't need a template anymore. So now in the beginning, we will be using a template. Any other question? Okay,
I
guys.
have one question.
Yes,
Eh,
William?
In the official test, well, in a Centrum, for example, here on CBA or ISB, do I have to take my own papers or they give?
They give you. You
Okay.
don't have, yes, they will be giving you paper. Okay, guys. So without further ado, let's just start by looking at an example. Okay, so to see how this actually goes. So remember we said you will be reading this text for 45 seconds. Now, what do you guys need to do when you're reading? I will tell you in a bit. But before, let's take a moment to read. I'm gonna give you guys exactly 45 seconds to read it, and then we'll discuss. Okay, so please start reading this text. We'll have 45 seconds to do so. Okay, guys. So what do you have to do when you're reading? The first thing is be glad because we already know what to expect. You guys will know the structure, you will know what to do the moment you get this text. So these are the things that you guys need to do when you're reading. The first thing is identify certain elements in the text. What are those elements? The first one is going to be a change. So the thing is, this text is announcing, proposing, or talking about a change in the university. It could be anything really. They could be changing anything, right? They could be changing the menu of the cafeteria. They could be changing the requirements for graduation. They could be changing, I don't know, they could be renovating something, renovating the dorms, eliminating the bus service or changing the routes. Anything could be going on in the university. Yes, Jasper, do you have a question?
I've got a question. Is it necessary to copy what we think about this announcement, or is not necessary?
No, it's not necessary. You don't, I mean, you're not allowed to give your opinion or to talk about yourself in this task
Okay.
or in any of the integrated tasks.
Okay, I see.
Okay. But let's go back to here. So when you guys are reading, the first thing you need to do is identify what that change is. You need to look for that change, understand what's happening. What are they changing in the university? Okay, that is the first thing. And the second is that you'll find that you have a number of reasons here supporting that change. So in this text, they are basically explaining why they want to do this certain change. Okay? How many reasons were you guys able to identify here?
Two or three, I think.
Okay, so there are actually only two. And the good thing is that there's always only going to be two reasons. You will never have one, you will never have three or four. You will always have two reasons. So you need to make sure that you identify which one those are. Now, speaking of this example, can you guys tell me what the change is? What is the university doing?
Yeah, it's shutting down the sculpture department, or the sculpture program of the arts department.
Exactly. They're shutting down, they're eliminating the sculpture program. So this program won't be, that won't be an option for students anymore, right? They won't be able to take these sculpture courses. So they're shutting down, they're eliminating the sculpture program. And as you can see, I just underlined that part, the sculpture program will be eliminated. Now, what are the two reasons they give for doing this? Why are they eliminating the sculpture program?
The lack of interest of students.
Exactly. So the first reason they say is that students are not interested, right? There's a lack of student interest. And what about the second reason?
Teacher or not? Teacher is retiring. Sorry, teacher is retiring this year.
Great. But remember that when we talk about university, we call the teachers professors, right?
Professor, sorry, professor, yeah.
Oh, the professor is retired. And those are the two reasons. I recommend that you guys, the structure is always the same. Usually in the first sentence, you have the change. Then you can divide what you have left into two. And if you realize if you divide it into two, the first half is going to go for the first reason and the second one goes for the second reason. Okay? So that is awesome. We know the change, the sculpture program will be eliminated, and we know the two reasons. One, there's a lack of students' interest, and two, the professor is retiring, so who's going to teach this class? Do you guys see what we did? Do you see those three elements in here? Yep, nice. Now, what do you do with them? So you are allowed to take notes during this part too. You can take notes. But if you're going to do so, then remember to only write the keywords because at the end of the day, you only have 45 seconds. So what would you say the most important words are? I would tell you to only write down 1, 2, 3. You know, 4 words at most. So what words would you consider the most important ones? What are the keywords?
Sculpture,
Great, that's the first one, sculpture. What else?
interest,
Great. And
retiring or
great,
retirement,
that's it. Honestly, only 3, you know, those are the only ones you need. Maybe you can help yourself and do some things like the sculpture program is being eliminated, right? So you can maybe cross it out. You write down a sculpture and like an X or something, or you cross it out. A lack of students' interest, you can maybe have something like this, right? No interest, or you can write down no interest. And professor retiring, maybe you can write down prof retiring, and that's it. That's all you need, right? You don't really need anything else. So out of this text, you have to extract those 3 elements, and you have to write down a few notes, 5 words at most, because you really won't have to talk much about this. You just need this to have a bit of context, but this isn't the main thing in your response, okay? Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions about that? Nope. Nice. So what do we do next after reading?
We listen the conversation.
Exactly. You guys will listen to this conversation. You will hear how many students?
2,
Exactly. Always 2. You will always hear 2 students, and they're going to be talking about what?
about the announcement we read.
They're gonna be discussing, talking about what you just read. So you have the context. Now, here's what happens. Remember that in the reading, you have these 3 elements, right? You have the change, which is being proposed or announced. You have the first and the second reason. Now, in the listening, in the part that you have to listen to, you will hear this student's conversation. There are gonna be 2 students talking about that. The thing is, one of these students, only one of them is gonna be the most important student. The only one is like a passive listener. But there's one student specifically that will have a strong opinion about that change. So this student that we're saying could be either against the change and be like, that's a terrible idea, I hate what they're doing. Or the student could be in favor of the change and be like, well, I really like what they're doing, I think it's gonna work, I love their idea. Okay? So remember, you have 2 students. Only one of them will have a strong opinion about that change. So the first thing you guys need to do is, before even understanding your opinion, I would recommend identify who the student is. Who is the main student? Why am I telling you this? Because usually you have a male and a female student. And when you're answering, when you're speaking, you're going to have to talk about that student. So in order to know what pronouns to use, the first thing you guys need to do is identify whether the student that has the opinion is female or male. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do when you're listening. Is it the male or the female student that has the opinion? Now, the second thing you guys need to do is understand his or her opinion. So is this student in favor or against the change? Okay, that's the second thing. And finally, you need to identify or catch the 2 reasons that this student gives supporting his or her opinion, right? So if the student is in favor of the change, they will give you 2 reasons why. And if the student is against, you will have other 2 reasons that are very likely gonna be objecting the ones that were mentioned here. They are closely related, okay? So I'm pretty sure that that student is gonna be talking about the lack of students' interest, and they are also gonna be discussing the fact that the professor's retiring. Maybe they're in favor, maybe they're against. You need to be able to catch that, right? Is that okay so far? Do you understand? Do you get the idea of what you need to do when you're listening? Yes, remember you must take notes, okay? That isn't a question, that's a must, that's not an option. So let's see, we're gonna listen to this conversation, and you guys have to take a few notes. Please get ready, I'm gonna play it now.
Now listen to two students discussing the article.
Everything all right?
Yeah, I'm just upset about that article I showed you this morning.
Why? What's the big deal?
Well, as an art major, I think it's a big loss for the department. The university's got it all wrong.
What do you mean?
Well, the low enrollment isn't because art majors don't want to take these classes. Problem is, who has time to take them when there are so many other requirements?
I don't understand.
See, the classes they're eliminating are all optional. The required courses are mostly painting and drawing, and they take up all our time. What we really need are different requirements. Then art majors could take a better variety of classes, all the things we're interested in.
That makes sense. But the thing about the professor...
Well, that's true. But still, they're being drastic. If money's the problem, they could hire a part-time professor. Or most of the professors in the department have secondary fields.
Really?
Yeah. At least a few painting teachers are also great sculptors. I'm sure one of them could teach a class.
Okay, that was the conversation. So let's take a look. Okay, sorry. Okay, guys. Let's talk about that. The first thing, let's say that these are our notes. Okay, so remember we said we're gonna write down only a few things for our notes, right? For the reading. So in the change, we said the sculpture being eliminated. Reason 1 was interest or no interest. And reason 2 was professor retiring, right? This is what we had from the reading. Now, the first thing that you guys need to do when you're taking your notes, when you're listening to the conversation, remember I told you, make sure that you always identify if the student, first of all, is female or male, right? In this case, the student who had the strong opinion, was it female or male? The female or male student?
Female.
The male?
No, female.
Female, right? Yeah, exactly. So it was the girl who had the opinion. So I would recommend that instead of writing female, you write down the pronoun already. So once you know that it's the female student who has the opinion, write down the words she in huge letters, okay, in capital letters. Because you're gonna be using that pronoun a lot, and it's easy to get confused or to forget if it was female or male. Okay, so always write down the pronoun. And second thing, was she against or in favor of this change?
Against.
Exactly. So the student was a she who was against this change. Now, what do you have for your reasons? What was the first reason that she gives against this change? Why doesn't she think that it's a good idea?
The time that the requirements, but that the other classes that are more important than this one.
Okay.
Because this one is optional and the other ones require more time than so so they can't have enough time to take this class.
Exactly, great. So I don't know if you guys noticed that she is responding to what the letter said, right? The first reason that the letter had was the students are not interested in taking these classes, but she opposes that, right? She objects what the letter says, and she says, well, it's not that we're not interested, but we don't have time to take these classes that are optional. The required classes are the ones that take up most of our time, so we have no time left to take the ones that maybe we're interested in, but we don't have time to take those classes, right? So according to her, there are many students who actually want to take these courses, but they don't have time because of the many requirements that their major has. So great. What about the second reason? What does she think about the fact that the professor is retiring?
Yeah, I think she kind of accept and give other solutions that college can apply, like having a time part professor or one of the other professors that have a second skill, something like that.
Exactly. So yes, that's true. So she knows that the professor is retiring. There's nothing to do about it. But she says, so if the budget is the problem, if they don't have the budget to hire another professor, she gives some suggestions, right? So she could maybe hire a part-time professor to teach the class, or maybe ask another professor that's already in the university that has a second field to teach this sculpture class, right? So she gives a number of options or suggestions to solve this problem. And that's it. Is there anything else you guys want to add? Okay. So that's it. This is how your notes should be looking like. You just have a few words for the reading. You have a little bit more details for the listening, but it's still very summarized, right? I'm not trying to write down a transcript of the conversation, but instead focusing on the main ideas and the keywords. Do you guys have any questions about that? That was the reading and the listening. Any questions? Now, after that happens, you will hear the question. And it will appear on your screen. This is the question. It says, the woman expresses her opinion of the change that has been announced, state her opinion, and explain her reasons for holding that opinion. Right? So can you tell me something? Is this question asking you to summarize everything?
Yes.
Are you sure?
More than summarize, to give support the idea of the woman in this case.
Yeah, so that's true. They're focusing more on the woman, right? They're focusing more on the student, on the list. They don't say anything about the article other than the change that has been announced. But at the end of the day, they're just asking you to explain what the woman thinks, right? Explain what what the student's opinion is, and explain the reasons that they give. That's it, and that's what you guys have to do. So in your response, we're gonna focus more on the listening than we do on the reading, and that's a mistake that most students make. They tend to focus too much on the reading. They spend too much time, or they waste too much time summarizing the reading or summarizing the article, and they don't have enough time to explain what is the most important part of your response, which is the student's point of view. Okay? So we're gonna keep that in mind. I want you to always keep the questions in mind, because you need to fulfill these questions and answer them directly. And remember that this is the time that you get after you hear the question. You get 30 seconds to prepare, and you get 60 seconds to speak. What do you guys think we should do when we prepare? What would you suggest we do during those 30 seconds to prepare? What would you guys do?
maybe write keywords.
Okay. But you already have your notes, right? And you have some keywords there. So the thing is, I wouldn't tell you you should do this, okay? I cannot tell you there's one specific thing that you guys should be doing during that preparation time, because it's different for every student and it depends on your needs. It depends on what you need. And that's why we have those speaking sessions where we can see, where I can give you some tips for you, right? So I got a message. Rennie says that he's got to go. That's fine. No problem, Rennie. Thanks for letting me know. See you tomorrow. Okay, so what I was saying, it depends. I won't tell you exactly what to do during these 30 seconds because it depends on what you need to do. It depends on how you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are. But I will give you some ideas. So for example, in my case, my problem personally was that when I was speaking or when I was listening and reading, I took too many notes, honestly. I think I'm a fast note taker. So I tend to write down a lot in my notes. And then when I'm speaking, since I'm concentrated in doing it well, then I'm looking at my notes and I'm trying to mention every single detail that I have there. That was my problem. And I used to run out of time a lot. So what I personally did was during this preparation time, I had my notes there and I started crossing out a few ideas that I didn't consider relevant or that I didn't consider as important as the others. So in your note, you probably have many, many ideas, right? And many, many things. So one strategy is to cross out irrelevant details, irrelevant ideas, irrelevant words, and to circle or highlight or just mark the important ones or the most important ones. So that's one strategy you guys can use. So you can start crossing out irrelevant details in your notes and start to mark the most important ones so that you make sure that you mention the most important ones and you leave out the ones that are not really significant to your response. That's one strategy. That's what I did personally. But for example, I've seen other students who, like maybe some students have problems expressing their ideas. So they know everything, they understood everything, but sometimes it's just hard to articulate the words correctly and to put the words into and create a good sentence. So if that is your problem, if you're struggling with expressing your ideas, you have the ideas, but you just don't know how to express them correctly, then one thing you guys can do is start speaking already. So I've had many students who do this. I tell them, okay, so starting now, you have 30 seconds to prepare. And they already start speaking and answering the question. If you think about it, 30 seconds is half of your response, right? So if you start speaking already during those 30 seconds, then the second time when you have to start speaking for your real answer, the time that is going to be recorded, you're going to do it better, right? Because you've already kind of practiced what you're going to say. You already know what to avoid saying. You already have an idea of how to form your sentences. So that's a good strategy, especially if you're struggling in coming up with good sentences. Okay, so you can already start speaking, start practicing what you're going to say out loud, no problem. They won't be recording any of what you do during those 30 seconds. So it's completely up to you. You can do that as well. And there are many other things that you can be doing. Some people just like to do nothing there and they just try to relax, breathe in, breathe out for a bit, and then they start speaking. So it depends. If you're too nervous sometimes, then maybe that can be a good strategy. So it really depends on what you need, but those were some ideas. Okay. Is that all right? Do you guys have any questions? No questions?
In this, when we answer, is there a template here to answer or?
Yes, there's a template. We're going to see it. Any other question? Okay. So remember, So you're done with the preparation time. Your 30 seconds are over. You need to start speaking. So what do you do when you guys are speaking? Now here's the template. You have 60 seconds and you need to focus more on the listening. This is honestly the best strategy. I don't recommend you change any of the structure of this template, okay? You are more than welcome to change the words. If there's a word that you're struggling with, that you cannot pronounce well, that you simply don't like it, that you think it sounds odd, that's fine. Go ahead and change the words if you want, but you need to make sure that you keep the structure of this template, okay? So when I tell you, you need to, I don't know, explain reason number 1 here, you have to explain reason number 1 there. So here's what you guys are gonna do during those 60 seconds that you have to speak. The first thing, during the first 15 seconds, I would say that the ideal time is 10 to 15 seconds, okay? So during the first 10 to 15 seconds, you need to have an introduction, okay? And in this introduction, basically what you guys are gonna do is state the student's opinion and mention the change from the reading, right? That's what you guys are gonna do in the introduction. You're gonna state the student's opinion and mention the change. How can you do that? Well, here's a template. You can say something like this. The student in the conversation is against the idea of eliminating the sculpture program, okay? So obviously, if the student is against, then you say that the student is against. And if the student is in favor, you say that the student supports. It depends. But that's it. As you can see, it didn't take me more than 10 seconds, and I was speaking fairly slowly. So the student in the conversation is against the idea of eliminating the sculpture program. That is your introduction, okay? I have the opinion and I have the change. Is that okay so far? Do you have any questions about that introduction? No? Okay. So after you're done with your introduction, you need to spend 20 to 25 seconds in the first reason. Okay. So basically, you just have to explain what the student said. So you can say, first of all, in this case, it's a she, right? So that is why it was important to know the pronoun. So first of all, she explains that, and then you explain the reason. So for example, you could say, first of all, she explains that it isn't really that students are not interested in taking these classes, but that they don't have time, since all of the required courses take up all of their time. So I just explained the first reason that you gave, right? That's it. And then during the last 20 to 25 seconds, you need to explain the second reason. So you say, in addition, she believes that if the professor is retiring, maybe what they could do is hire a part-time professor or ask another professor to teach his class. And you can explain if you have more time, right? But basically, that's what you guys do. And that's gonna make a total of 60 seconds, okay? You don't need a conclusion if you're wondering if you need one. You don't need a conclusion. Of course, if you have extra time, if you have time left to do something else, you can go with a short conclusion and say something like, these are the main reasons why the student feels that way. Yes, Carolina, tell me.
Do you think we need different templates depending on the note we need, of the score we need, or it's all about how we talk and how we explain it?
Okay, good question. So this, I mean, the score that you get is gonna be based on different criteria. So for example, one of them will be the way that you speak. So it will have to do with your fluency, with the number of pauses you make, with the filler words you use. So everything about how you deliver the response, how you speak, how you intonate, how you emphasize certain words. Another criteria will be the content. So what you say. Are you actually saying what the student said? Are you maybe going off topic? Did you understand what the student said? Did you understand what the change was? So that will be content. Do you manage your time well? Are you able to finish your response in the 60 seconds you have? Are you not spending too much time on irrelevant details, but you're focusing on the most important info? So that has to do with content. Also, the way that you're connecting your ideas. Are you using good connectors? So that part, the way you're connecting your ideas, would be the only one related to the template, because the template here is using different connectors and different transition words that help you connect and put together your ideas. That'll be the only thing really that the template could affect. Because, and the other part, of course, is going to be grammar and vocabulary. So maybe the template helps you with some vocabulary, using maybe fancy words and stuff. But at the end of the day, is what you do with the template that matters, and that will determine your score. Is what you say in the parts that you don't have in the template what will determine your score, not really this. Okay, so this template can be used no matter what your level is, no matter what score you need, and what you do with it is what will determine your score.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay. So, any other question? Any other question, guys? Okay. So I'm gonna do it so that you see how I manage my time, how I speak, and what I say, what I don't say, so that you just can see or take a look at a sample response. Okay. And remember that today was just our theory class. So don't worry, tomorrow you guys will be practicing. We'll be doing a few of these questions, as many as we can, and I will be hearing your responses. Okay, so just to finish with today's class, I'm gonna use the template. And as you can see here on my screen, you will be able to see how I manage my time, right? How I organize the content of the response. So, okay, this is 1 minute. So I'm gonna do the best I can. Let's see. The student in the conversation is against the idea of eliminating the sculpture program. First of all, she explains that it isn't really that students are not interested in taking this course or that there's a lack of students' interest, but instead, most Air major students don't have the time to take them. Since the required courses, the ones that are mandatory, take up all of their time, and they cannot really choose the classes that they want to take. In addition, she believes that if money is the problem and the fact that the professors retiring is one factor for this decision, what they could do or what the university could do is maybe hire a part-time professor to teach this class, or perhaps they could ask another teacher or another professor that works in the department to teach this class, given that most professors have secondary fields. These are the two reasons the student has for feeling this way. Right? So something like that. It wasn't maybe exactly the like 10 seconds in the beginning, but I tried to accommodate my response based on the time that I have. And that is what I mostly wanted you guys to see. So in the beginning, I noticed that I had some extra time, so I made a bigger pause. I took a deep breath and then I continued because I had like 3 seconds to relax there. And then I went with my first reason. So I noticed that I was still having more time and I tried to continue explaining. And I did the same for the second one, right? And I saw that I had some extra time, so I had a conclusion in there. But the important thing is that I'm trying to focus on the main ideas, right? And I'm trying to speak calmly. I'm nervous, but I'm trying not to show it. I'm trying to hide it as much as I can. And basically do what we did, the more you practice, the better you get. And the more you understand the structure, the easier it'll be for you. So what do you guys think? Do you have any questions now? No questions? Okay, guys. So that isn't it. There's a lot that we still have to say and we still have to do, mainly practice. But I still want to give you some tips. Okay, there are some things we need to see. You know, there are some tips about the tenses, the grammar that you'll use, some phrases that I can give you for ideas on how to connect words and how to connect the reading with the listening, because that's an important thing too, how you connect and contrast the ideas in an implied way. So there are many things that we still have to do, but we'll do them tomorrow. Remember, we have a practice session. So you guys will be practicing and I'll be giving you feedback. Do you have any questions before we go, before we finish today's class? No questions, no comments? Okay, great. Then please don't forget to fill out today's survey before you leave. And I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow.
I have a question now. I think I heard yesterday we have like a simulacro. Yeah, but it's all the tests, right? 4 hours. Do we have just for task or for sections like reading, or just listening or just speaking?
Okay, so when you install the software, you're gonna notice that it is divided into sections. So that gives you the opportunity of doing the reading and then the next day doing the listening. But I suggest that you do all at once. Okay, so try to do it all at once. And I think we were talking about this yesterday, right? It's great to take simulation tests. So maybe like on Saturday, on the weekend, you can try to do it and take the full test all at once.
Okay, thank you.
Or any other question? Okay. Has everyone completed the survey yet? I think we're missing one response. Okay. Okay, guys. Well, anyways, thank you so much for joining. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.